was a senior in college, I took a photographic course. And one of the assignments was to do a book, a photographic essay. So I did this photographic essay, which I called I Am Disjoint. And I was really trying to figure out, I was 20 years old, and I was trying to figure out, like every 20-year-old does, who I am, what's life about, and, how do I deal with all my issues. Looking at this book, 40 years later, I'm astounded at the clarity of the imagery, which not only is evocative, but it is revealing of the truth of who I was at that moment of my life, even though I didn't know it. I couldn't articulate my conflicts, my confusion, my 20-year-old angst. But these photographs, looking back, tell me exactly where I was when I was 20 years old. The very first photograph is of this bicycle with a dark shadow of who's a girl walking past the bicycle. I have no idea why I chose that as the first image. But today I can understand that, because I was I was dealing with a sense of an interior split inside of myself, where I couldn't decide whether I was going to be that or this, or right or wrong, or good or bad, or all the stuff that you get taught when you're a kid. It was all coming forward, and I was trying to figure out what it's all about. And the two circles, now I had no idea who Carl Jung was at the time, but when you look at the two circles here, you can see that there are symbols of wholeness, of the self. So it's like this figure splitting myself in half. And that's, looking back 40 years, I can say that's exactly where I was. So the first image is really the whole story. The next image is of a boy who's standing behind a door, which we carried into a field, big heavy door from our fraternity house. And he's like looking as though he's trying to get past the door. What is that door? Probably for me at that time, it was trying to get past some obstacle in my life, to get to the future, to get to a place I couldn't get to yet. Again, all of this was just feeling. I didn't even have enough photographic experience to understand how to make an image. I simply went with my gut feeling. And I can say now, after 4 years, that I was pretty much in touch with my gut feeling. This next series of images is, again, I have no idea why I made the photograph, and then when I edited it, I just chose what seemed right. This image is of a Star Trek film. And I shot my own feet, as I'm sitting there watching, and you can see the TV program. And this guy looks like he's dying, which he was. He looks like terrified. And the next image is of someone jumping out a window. I actually got guys to jump out windows for me. And the next image is of, again, the Star Trek. Now you can see the person who's trying to get away from the TV like he's afraid. Well, 40 years after looking at this book, I finally realized the word Star Trek is not Star Trek. It's start wreck. Start the wreckage. Start the wreck. Like a train wreck. Little did I know at the age of 20 that, in fact, I was on my way to, in a very real sense, starting a great wreckage in my life, which took 20 years to unfold, and caused a lot of damage, just like a train wreck. And it took me 20 years to understand that, maybe even longer. This book, these photographs were like a map for the future. These photographs were like telling me what's going to happen, but I didn't have the understanding or the insight or the knowledge or the experience to be able to read the very photographs that were telling me what's going to happen in my life. So now we have several images of people jumping out windows. It's a suicide. When you jump out a window, you're committing suicide. And then it's the only self-portrait of me in this book where you can see me jumping out a window. And the next thing is I'm hanging in a tree. You know, when you hang on a tree, that is a symbol of a crucifixion. And so it's like I'm dead. What I didn't understand when I made this photograph is that after every crucifixion, there's a resurrection. And it took 20 years for the resurrection to show up. Every photograph in this book is a self-portrait. Some aspect of my being, trying to decipher who I was, who I wanted to be, what the conflicts were, what had to be healed and made into wholeness. And it was all dark and confusing to me. I had very little help, as in those days we didn't have a lot of help. And so these images now tell me that I was helping myself, giving expression to some deeper knowledge and mystery and truth about myself, so that maybe in the future I would see through these photographs something that would help me to move through that process of self-revelation, self-growth, self-knowledge, and so on and so forth. Integration. And the photograph after that is of me and David Smith, all confused together with a ladder on the side. You know, from Jungian psychology viewpoint, this photograph tells you everything about Tony Boccaccio when he was 20 years old. He did not know where his boundaries were. And he didn't know where anyone else's boundaries were. They were confusing. And the ladder is a symbol of the truth that in order to make those boundaries clear, to know who I was so I could relate to other people clearly, I had a lot of climbing to do, a lot of work to do. When I made this photograph, I knew what I was doing, but I was in denial of it. But I remember the image, I remember the moment. There's Larry Stuckey looking into a mirror. And the real person is in darkness, but the figure in the mirror is clear. And it was a self-expression that the real Tony was still in darkness, still confused, still unseeable, not clear. But his reflection was clear. And it's interesting that the only part of Larry's body that you can see is from the waist up. It's almost as though from the waist down, the reflection wasn't even there. It doesn't even exist. What I discovered in this black and white section of the book, only 40 years later, is that I was forced in a situation as a young 20-year-old to have to choose between opposites, between black and white, between good and bad, between right and wrong, between what the world said and what I felt inside of myself. And ultimately, in my situation, it was between being straight and being gay. This was an untenable situation to be in at my age, but I had no help. Today there's more help, but back then there wasn't. And so I had to find out, how am I going to manage this fearful, difficult, and confusing path. Like so many others of my era, I managed it by going into the closet. I figured, well, the only way to protect myself is disappear. And what I learned too late in my life is that the closet I was in had glass walls. I couldn't see out, but everyone could see in. And when I finally did come out 20 years later, everyone who loved me said, well, we knew you were gay. We didn't care. I was the last person to accept the fact that I was gay. This is the tragedy. And I don't want this kind of tragedy to happen to anybody else. I'm not the only person this happened to. And I don't think I'll be the only person this will happen to. But I want to encourage all young people to not let your fears about being accepted or rejected or loved or right or wrong or up and down and back and forth or gay or straight, forget about all that. Just show up. whoever you are, give us who you are in your totality, because without you, as unique as you are, the universe will be poor. We need you, all of you. So please, show up, come out, and let us love you. And that's all I want to say about that. How'd I do, boss?
Pretty damn good.